August 5th, 2024. The last American military plane lifted off from Niger. $100 million in infrastructure left behind in the Sahara. And 6,000 miles away, someone was watching very carefully. Aisha opens her stall at 6 in the morning. Dried beans, millet, groundnuts, arranged in small pyramids. She's done this for 14 years. Yesterday, she heard there was a ceremony at the airport. Some foreign soldiers were leaving. She didn't know their flag. She didn't know what they protected. She doesn't know what just changed. 400 kilometers east of where Aisha is standing. The longest pipeline in Africa runs under the desert. You've never heard of it. Neither has she, but it connects directly to the price of the phone in your pocket. The company that built that pipeline is the same company that supplied the junta with weapons to expel American soldiers. Think about that for a second. If the wrong player controls what's under that desert, the uranium, the oil, the cobalt, nearby in the next 18 months, your next iPhone adds $400. Your Tesla delivery stretches 3 years. Your electricity bill climbs 15 to 20%. This is not a war story, it is a supply chain story. And it started the day that plane left. I cross-referenced 5 datasets that no single outlet has connected. AFRICOM's official withdrawal records, Africa Center for Strategic Studies, military data, South China Morning Post's, CNPC Pipeline Crisis Reporting, IEA Critical Minerals Analysis, World Nuclear Association Niger reserves data. Here is what sits at the intersection of all 5. Every time a Western military base closed in the Sahel, a Chinese pipeline, refinery, or railway was already there, not arriving. Already there. China didn't move in after America left. China was there first. America was protecting infrastructure it didn't own. This pipeline, $4.6 billion, built by China's state oil company, completed in 2024. It took 20 years of Chinese investment to build. It took 3 weeks after the last US soldier left for rebels to blow a section of it up. $9 million per day. That is what China lost every single day that pipeline stayed closed. Without US drones flying overhead, there was nobody left to stop it. America wasn't just protecting Niger. America was, without knowing it, protecting China's most expensive investment in Africa. And then, America left. China's state oil company entered Niger in 2003. Not 2023. Not after the coup. 2003. America sent its first special forces to Niger in 2013. 10 years later. China had already been operating there for a decade. 2008. PetroChina cements its Niger partnership. 2011. Agadem oil field begins production. 2019. Pipeline construction starts. Every year, America was training Niger's military. China was building Niger's economy. July 2023. Coup. America freezes aid to Niger legally required under US law. 9 months later, China signs a $400 million loan directly to the junta. No democracy conditions. No human rights requirements. Cash. The terms? 7% interest. 12-month repayment. Collateral: Niger's own oil. The junta borrowed against its only resource. From the company that built the pipeline to extract that resource. China owns the oil field operations. China built the pipeline. China controls the export route. China receives the oil. The loan gets repaid in oil to China. Niger gets what's left. Niger's GDP in 2024, negative 1.2%. 54% of its population in extreme poverty. The country sitting on the longest pipeline in Africa cannot afford to keep its lights on. Niger gets what's left. And what's left is nothing. While America was spending $100 million building a drone base, China was spending $4.6 billion building the infrastructure that drone base was unknowingly protecting. 46 times the investment. Zero military risk. America's base abandoned. China's pipeline operational. Until the drones stopped flying. Then the rebels came. June 12, 2024. Rebels attack soldiers guarding the pipeline. 6 killed. June 16th, the pipeline itself. July 21st, CNPC suspends all Agadem operations. Chinese engineers evacuated under armed escort. By 2025, it escalated. Pumping stations bombed. Construction camps attacked. Chinese engineers kidnapped, appearing in jihadist videos from border zones that US drones used to watch. China has one rule it has never broken in 70 years of foreign policy. One rule: we do not send soldiers to protect our investments abroad. That is the foundation of every relationship China has built in Africa for 7 decades. Niger is about to break that rule for them, because without American drones, China has no choice. And the choice China makes next puts warships in the Atlantic. Most people draw a straight line. US loses base terrorism, fills the vacuum. That is the story every outlet ran. That is not the real story. The real connection does not run from A to B. It runs through C, a hidden middle node that changes everything. US exits Niger. China loses its free security umbrella. Rebels attack China's pipeline immediately. China bleeds $9 million a day. China's 70-year non-interference policy starts cracking. China cracks. China militarizes Africa to replace the security America provided. China militarizes. China pushes for Atlantic Naval Base. Atlantic Naval Base opposite the US East Coast. That is Node B. That is where your supply chain lives. Node C is not one event. It is 5 simultaneous pressure points, all triggered by the same moment. The moment the last US drone went dark over Niger. The commander of US Africa Command testified before the Senate Armed Services Committee. He called a Chinese military base on Africa's Atlantic coast his #1 global power competition concern. Not Russia, not Iran, not North Korea, a port in West Africa, opposite New York City, 4,800 miles. Bata to Norfolk Naval Station, home of the US Atlantic Fleet. If China bases warships there for the first time since the Cold War, the US faces a military threat from the Atlantic, not the Pacific, the Atlantic. In August 2023, Gabon's president secretly committed his Atlantic coastline to China for a military base. A senior White House official flew to Libreville personally to convince him to reverse it. He did. This time, of the 78 African ports where Chinese firms are involved, 36 have already hosted PLA naval vessels. Not military bases. Not yet. But the infrastructure is there. The relationships are there. The precedent is Djibouti. Djibouti is the blueprint. China opened a logistics facility there in 2017, called it humanitarian support. By 2024, expanded to dock aircraft carriers and nuclear submarines, miles from America's own base. The same playbook is now running on the Atlantic coast. Aisha is still arranging her groundnuts. She still doesn't know, but now you do. And here is the part that should make you angry. 2 superpowers, 2 investments, 1 country, both losing at the same time. But only one of them is paying for it with your money. American taxpayers funded 11 years of military operations in Niger, built the drone base, trained the Nigerian army, ran counterterrorism missions across the Sahel. While that was happening, China built the oil refinery, signed the pipeline contract, completed Africa's longest pipeline, loaned the junta $400 million. Every American tax dollar spent on stability in Niger directly protected these assets. The equation nobody in Washington calculated. US military presence equaled a free security subsidy for China's $4.6 billion investment. America was China's security contractor, unpaid, unknowing. March 2024, Niger cancels its security agreement with America. April 2024, 21 days later, Niger signs a $400 million oil deal with China. The sequence is not a coincidence. It is a strategy. Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger. 3 coups, 3 Western military exits, 3 countries where China had infrastructure investments before the coups happened. The pattern holds across every single case. Here is the sentence that should be taught in every foreign policy class in America. America left Niger to save money. The bill it created will cost 100 times more. The Pentagon already flagged this in writing. In the annual report to Congress on Chinese military developments, it is not speculation. It is the US government's own assessment. Here is the paradox in full. US exits to save resources. Security vacuum created. China's assets attacked. China militarizes to compensate. Atlantic threat grows. US must now spend more to counter Chinese naval expansion than it ever spent in Niger. America left Niger to avoid costs. The cost of countering what comes next, a Chinese naval presence in the Atlantic, will exceed everything America spent in the Sahel by orders of magnitude. Aisha is packing up her stall. The afternoon call to prayer echoes across Niamey, 400 kilometers east. A pumping station sits guarded by soldiers who no longer have American drones watching their perimeter. She doesn't know. You do. Now comes the part that matters for you specifically. 2 timelines. 6 months. 12 months. Here is what the data says is coming, and what it means for your wallet specifically. 6 months. Uranium prices stay volatile. Niger's 8% of global supply remains contested between Russia and China. 20% of American electricity depends on stable uranium procurement. That stability is no longer guaranteed. 12 months. If China formalizes military access anywhere on Africa's Atlantic coast, the strategic geometry of the US eastern seaboard changes for the first time since the Cold War. Simultaneously, cobalt and graphite supply leverage tightens. Your devices feel it first. Cobalt China controls 70% of global refining. Every iPhone has cobalt in its battery. If China restricts cobalt exports the way it restricted gallium and germanium in 2023, the price of your next phone does not inch up. It jumps. Uranium spot prices already climbed 40% since 2022. That is before Niger's supply fully destabilizes. Utilities buying uranium on the spot market pass costs directly to consumers. This is already happening. It will accelerate. The security picture compounds everything. ISIS Sahel deaths nearly 10 times higher in 2024 than 2019. Without US drone surveillance, no early warning. The group is now pushing toward Benin, Togo, Ghana. These are the same coastal states America needs for new basing relationships. The fallback plan gets harder every month. ISIS expands toward the same coastline America is trying to move into. 3 scenarios, starting with the one nobody wants to say out loud. Worst case, 20% probability, China secures an Atlantic naval base within 24 months. Niger uranium flows to a China-Russia axis. Cobalt restrictions follow. The F-35 program, which requires 17 critical minerals, China controls faces component delays. The Pentagon already flagged this scenario. In writing, most likely 60% probability. No single catastrophic event. Mineral sourcing costs climb 10 to 15% over 3 years. US utilities pay uranium premiums. Tech companies absorb cobalt cost increases and pass them to you. Best case, 20% probability. The US successfully pivots to coastal partners. Benin, Côte d'Ivoire, Ghana. The Minerals Security Partnership, 14 countries, plus the EU, produces real alternative sourcing. China's Atlantic base push gets blocked. Again, like Gabon. The best case is not impossible. The Minerals Security Partnership already exists. 14 countries, more than half of global GDP. The question is whether Washington funds it seriously or treats it as a press release. 3 things you can do right now. Not metaphorically. Specifically, here is something no financial advisor will tell you. The last time a major uranium supplier went offline unexpectedly, Kazakhstan export restrictions, 2022 uranium spot price jumped 40% in 6 weeks. Niger was a larger supplier than Kazakhstan was at that moment. The same supply shock running through a region with active rebel attacks on the infrastructure itself will not be gradual. Watch uranium futures. Ticker UX1. A sustained move above $90 per pound means utilities are scrambling. That scramble reaches your electricity bill within 2 quarters. You will see it coming if you know where to look. 2. If you hold defense or EV stocks, factor in a 15 to 25% raw material cost floor shift by 2026. Lockheed, Raytheon, Tesla, all exposed to the same mineral supply chains that run through the region we just watched destabilize. 3. This is a voting issue. The Minerals Security Partnership budget sits in front of Congress right now. Ask your representative where they stand. Not on Niger, not on China, on whether America has a funded strategy to source the minerals your phone and your power grid depend on. Sources all linked in the description. AFRICOM official withdrawal statement, September 2024. Africa Center for Strategic Studies Military Footprint Report. South China Morning Post CNPC Pipeline Crisis Coverage. IEA Critical Minerals Market Review 2024. World Nuclear Association Niger Data. China Global Investment Tracker. My methodology. 4 datasets mainstream coverage treats as separate stories. Military withdrawal timeline. Chinese infrastructure investment timeline. Rebel attack chronology. Critical mineral supply chain data. The connection only appears when you overlay all 4. What I do not know. The specific terms of the Russia-Niger Defense Pact, signed January 2024, classified. Whether China has formalized military access in Niger, unconfirmed in public records. Equatorial Guinea negotiations, post-2023, not public. This analysis is built entirely on open-source data. Aisha closed her stall at 8. The street is quiet now. 400 kilometers east. A pumping station sits in the dark. No drones overhead. No early warning system. Just soldiers and desert. And a pipeline that connects her country to a competition she will never see. She doesn't think about who turned the lights on. She doesn't think about who could turn them off. The pipeline rebels attacked in June 2024. China is now considering private military contractors to protect it. The same type of contractors Russia sent to Niger to replace American soldiers. If that happens, the last country still talking to Washington in the Sahel makes a choice. The next video covers what that choice looks like and why it matters more than anything we covered today.